All right, thanks for waiting, everyone. Waiting is all we seem to do, so I imagine we've gotten pretty good at it. Thank you, Finton. All right, did everyone prepare their pitches?
Yeah, I've got a good one.
I'm all set here.
We're ready, Precious.
Well, I've got half of one.
Yeah, and I've got the other half. I have prepared documentation.
Hey there, I've got a pitch too, and don't worry, it's not about killing you. Mostly.
The Viscount and I have brought a pitch as well.
Whoa, wait, Lord Devereaux? What are you doing here? It's not time for a new writing challenge yet, is it?
I have a pitch as well. Also, we have a bit of a dragon problem.
Okay. Color me intrigued and concerned in equal measure. Well, let's get started. Arnold, what have you got?
I want to do Cooking with Arnold as its own podcast.
Okay, I see. So, would you use real recipes?
Yeah.
All right, and it's not just all protein shakes?
Not entirely, no.
All right, I like it. We'll talk about it later. Finton, what's your pitch?
Just work on Devine. Or maybe, I don't know, finish the series you started?
That's it? You don't want to write it or anything? You just want me to do it?
Why? Are you offering?
No.
Then no. I just want you to work on it.
Okay, fine. Gollum, Schmeagol, what do you have?
We want this as a podcast too, Precious.
Yeah, and we have a name for it too.
Okay. What's the podcast called? It's not called the Precious Podcast, is it?
No, it's called the Saved is Draft Podcast.
Guys, that one's already taken. Also, you said the name.
Excuse me, does this mean we don't get to share our pitch?
I'm sorry, Lord Devereaux, you know the rules. When someone says the name, we gotta wrap up the intro.
It's quite a terrible rule, if I'm being honest. Well, perhaps next week then. I'll be taking my pitch elsewhere. Perhaps the BBC will be interested in Planet Dogs.
Oh, this is just great. Now what am I gonna do with all these tacos? Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 78 of the Saved as Draft podcast. Now, I know a few of you are wondering what Lord Devereaux and the Viscount wanted to pitch in that intro. All I'll say for now is that it's been a couple of months since my last writing challenge, and our two favorite story eaters are getting hungry. More news on that soon, so keep your eyes open for more details. Speaking of writing challenges, today's episode features an interview with the first of our 3 winners from the Halls of Pandemonium Challenge back in May. M. Brandon Robbins will be joining me later on this episode, and he was, of course, the lightweight bracket winner. Now, normally it wouldn't take me this long for our winners to come on the show, but in this case, I've been dealing with a lot of stress the last few months due to a plumbing emergency at my house here that led into a multi-month ordeal. It's finally winding down, so I'm bringing the winners onto the show and asking them questions that you submitted in my subscriber chat. It's a really fun interview this week, so look forward to that later in the episode. Today's episode also features our weekly shoutouts and, of course, the power-up prompt stories from this last week's Steampunk prompt. I've also got a great Wandering prompt winner from last week to share with you all, alongside some writing discussion around pitching your stories to readers and agents. And before all of that, let's kick things off with a look at this week's Community Spotlight. This week, our community spotlight is on Jennifer Jorgensen. Jennifer just celebrated her 1-year Stackiversary, as I like to call it. And of course, I wrote up one of my signature toasts over on Notes to celebrate. In case you missed it, here's what I had to say about this amazing member of our community. My first experience with Jennifer's work was her Power Up prompt entry for number 11, published in September of 2025. It was a story called Safe Travels. I was very impressed. Here was an author with an incredible command of imagery, atmosphere, and pacing that keeps you all the way on the edge of your seat. But there was no way that she could maintain this kind of quality across all of her posts, right? Right? Wrong. Jennifer followed up that piece with other stories for my prompts like Dead and Breakfast or The Reality Bends. And it was around this point that I realized that I was in the presence of true greatness. Fast forward to the first Indulgence Challenge that I hosted last year in October, and Jennifer's story Abscission once more reminded me that Jennifer hasn't even begun to reach her full potential. And even now, her work still manages to defy all laws of physics and quantum mechanics by somehow getting better every single time. I have a mental list of writers that I believe will have their names plastered on TV shows, movies, and all manner of books in the coming years. And Jennifer Jorgensen is 1000% one of those writers. And that was my toast there, but it's true, and I meant every word. So a huge shout out to Jennifer for being an awesome member of the community and for sharing such incredible work with us. Very grateful to have you here. Next, we'll take a look at this week's shout outs, but first, a word from our sponsor. Today's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is sponsored by The Radiant Refuge. Hello there, weary traveler. You find yourself in the presence of Fintan Merrybrook, the greatest storyteller in all of Devine. I'm here to tell you about a place where you can get away from it all. A place that you can visit from anywhere. All you need is a key and a door to get there. That's right, my friends. The Radiant Refuge is now open to all. It's not like the Order of the Pawn are using it or anything, and with that writer still leaving the series to collect dust, I'm sure we'll never hear from them again.
Fintan, what is this?
Oh, hello, Barton. I am here filming a commercial for my new interdimensional resort, a magical place for characters of all kinds to come rest and recharge.
It's Barry, and isn't this just a direct competitor to my company from last week, Red Shirt Resorts?
What? No, we don't have a dress code here.
No, I mean, it feels like you're trying to steal business from my company, Fintan.
Ha! Well, you know what they say, competition is good for the consumer.
Alright, fine, Fintan. You want a resort war? You'll get a resort war. The Red Shirts won't stand for this.
Do your worst, Blake. My team and our variety of shirt colors will wipe the floor with you.
Fintan, it's Barry.
I would get it right if I cared. Now get out of my commercial. Oh, sorry, we're still recording. I'll have to remember to cut that part out. So, please, come join us in the Radiant Refuge, where our song and drink will make your problems feel like they're a million miles away. Yes, that'll do nicely. Alright, and we're back. Every Tuesday, I post a thread in my subscriber chat where you can drop links to your latest work. I pick 5 at random to feature on the show here, and I share the links with Mina Howell and her Penny Dreadfuls podcast, so you get 2 chances for your work to be featured every week. Now, let's dive in and check out this week's shoutouts. First up this week is It's All Greek to Phil, Episode 9, by Hallie Jules. This is the latest episode in an ongoing serial that Hallie has been writing. The whole thing reads like a sitcom, and it's about a resurrected Greek runner trying to navigate the tumultuous world of modern life. It's a series that's equal parts hilarious and heartwarming, like all the best sitcoms. In this episode, we join Jessica as she and Phil attend Matt's birthday party, and Phil ends up eating the wrong kind of brownie, if you get my drift. It's a really good setup. Now, what I love about this series is how Phil manages to feel like a fish out of water just as much now as he did when he first arrived on modern-day Earth. Within a few minutes of this episode's opening, he's already learned a new word, shindig, and he thanks someone for calling him a freeloader. He just doesn't have any clue how modern life works, and it's so funny. Let's check out an excerpt so you can see what I mean. Jessica groans, reaching a whole new level of embarrassment. Turning on her heel, she approaches the table, holding her hand out to Phil. Phil, get down. It's time to go home. Phil's face lights up at the sound of her voice, but he doesn't budge. Swaying precariously, he calls everyone to attention. Behold, friends of Matthew! This is Jessica, the most beautiful woman the gods ever created. Jessica's cheeks flame red. Phil, please get down. Not yet. He holds up a finger. Not until everyone has witnessed your radiant beauty. Drunken snickers fill the air, making Jessica wish she could melt into the ground. Phil! Dearest Jessica, he interrupts, lowering to one knee and taking her hand. His umber eyes fix on hers, pupils blown wide. I will do as you ask, but first, I must share a ballad from one of the great bards of your time. Jessica gapes, too mortified to protest. Jessica, I hereby pledge that I am never going to give you up. The partygoers explode into rowdy cheers and laughter as he recites the rest of the Rick Astley refrain. Damn, Jess, Matt wheezes. He just rickrolled you. Did the kids teach him that? Blood boiling, Jessica yanks Phil closer. We need to leave. Jess? His face falls. Have I angered you? Get down! Now! Phil nods. Without another word, he fumbles off the table, death gripping Jessica's arm as they storm back inside. Ignoring the strange looks from the partygoers, she grabs her purse off Matt's coat tree and shoves Phil out the front door. Oh man, I love this series so much. If you'd like to get started from the beginning, you'll also find links to the series directory within the post itself here, so check the show notes and you'll find everything you need. Our second shout out this week is Things I Wish I Knew Before Making a Horror Feature by Miguel Martinez. This is super cool, not only because I've been following Miguel since I joined Substack, but also because I am a huge fan of found footage horror. And I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me explain. This article is a deep dive about Miguel's upcoming found footage horror film called City of Angels, and it details some of the big lessons he learned working on his first horror feature. The post even includes a full trailer for the film, and I highly recommend you check it out. I love content like this because I've been a fan of horror movies my whole life, and I love found footage specifically. I've never tried to make one, obviously, but if I ever get the chance, I can tell you one thing for sure is that I'll have this article handy, like it's a horror writer's Bible. Because there's some excellent insight in here, from considerations about sound, to the nature of found footage as a medium, to the way the film's scope plays a role in what should and shouldn't be in the final film. In other words, you won't be able to include every single one of your ideas, which is why so many films have deleted scenes. Honestly, in my opinion, it's a crime that this is free, because it's so valuable here. But I would check it out if you have any passing interest in horror filmmaking, because you'll find a lot of really amazing knowledge. Let's check out an excerpt. It was my first feature as a writer/director. We made it with what we had, which is a nice way of saying we made it with favors, panic, goodwill, stubbornness, and the kind of problem solving that makes you question your life choices. There were cult robes, mirrors, strange footage, night drives, seance material, creepy TVs, audition energy, bonfire energy, actress in LA anxiety, that very specific Airbnb emptiness where a place looks designed to be photographed but not lived in. I was trying to make something eerie and personal and scrappy, something about ambition, friendship, performance, and the way the dream can start eating you before you realize you sat down at the table. I am proud of it. It's the kind of thing I would watch and like. I also learned a lot. So here are things I wish I had known before making a horror feature. And that is, of course, from the introduction of the article. Fantastic work from Miguel. And my friend, if you're listening to this, I would love to have you come on the show here for a full interview about this project, if you would be interested. Let me know. And in the meantime, check out all of this amazing insight in the link in the show notes. Our third shout out this week is a quick rant about the new Carrie by Ghost Horse's writing page. From one style of horror to another, this is an article about some of the recently released images from Mike Flanagan's upcoming Carrie miniseries. It's a really interesting examination of Stephen King's seminal novel and the various adaptations that have been made for it over the years. It brings up some really interesting points about the character of Carrie herself, and how the story, while straightforward, has elements that could easily be explored in the right kind of film or miniseries. Now, this is my first time reading this author's work, but I really love the balance here between primary sources and analysis. It's easy to read, it flows well, and it cites all its sources. If you're a fan of Stephen King or of Carrie as a story, I recommend giving it a read and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's check out an excerpt. In an age of stunning and original horror, backrooms, obsession, sinners, weapons, etc., horror auteur Mike Flanagan has decided that what we really need right now is a remake of Stephen King's Carrie. This shouldn't surprise people. Flanagan has made a name for himself adapting classic horror novels into modern psychological thrillers. His reimagining of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House remains one of the greatest horror dramas of the last decade. His choice of Carrie for his latest project, however, has caused some eye rolls from online horror fans. The trouble with Stephen King's debut novel is that it's extremely straightforward. It isn't simple exactly, its themes and subject matter were controversial and original for the time, and its nuanced depiction of revenge, teenage angst, and religious fanaticism propelled King to the spotlight, where he remains 50 years later. However, as a short novel with few characters, a tight plot, and several memorable scenes, there isn't much left to adapt. Great stuff. Find a link to the full article in the show notes. It's a really good read. Our fourth shout-out this week is Shakespeare Turned Me Outdoorsy by Bex Rowan. This is a fantastic article about the highs and lows of outdoor theater production. It's a reflection on how things like a, quote, full broadsword fight in 3 layers of wool at 2 p.m. in July in a Midwest parking lot can be a lot. And yeah, it sounds like that would be quite taxing. There's some beautiful balance here, though, between storytelling, internal reflection, and some hilarious anecdotes from someone who's done their fair share of outdoor productions. Now, I can't say that I've ever been part of an outdoor production myself, though I did star in a few Shakespeare plays back in high school, so I can relate to the rush of being in front of a live audience. I really love the note here at the end, too, from Bex that adds more detail and context. I'll read that portion here in this excerpt. About Bex. Bex Rowan, they/he, helps queer folks and allies find adventurous connection and remember they're loved and not alone through queer theater and Shakespeare. After reading independently at 18 months old, accidentally becoming a professional Shakespeare actor within weeks of graduating high school, finding themselves with funding to train in stage combat, and accidentally co-producing a virtual theater festival during the pandemic shutdown, Rowan realized that maybe engineering wasn't the right career path. They now produce queerly classic adventures, celebrating trans and aspec lives in their Substack and their theater streaming platform, Roguish Goblin Stories. Find out more about Rowan on their website. Now that is really, really cool. I love that bio there, and I love everything about this post. So be sure to check out the full story at the link in the show notes. And of course, find that link at the end of the post to Beck's site, where you can learn more about all the cool stuff they're doing. All right, and our final shout out this week is Earl Grey by E.H. Lau. So this one's a haiku, which is really cool. There's something calming to me about a cup of tea, and this haiku captures that feeling wonderfully while evoking the scent of bergamot. I can practically smell and taste the tea in the picture. And given that a haiku is just 3 lines, I'm going to read the full thing for our excerpt. So here's Earl Grey by E.H. Lau. Earl Grey, a splash of bergamot with my tea, warm soul. Pitch perfect work. I love it. Just a wonderful haiku there, and great work across all of our shoutouts this week. I love the variety, so thank you to everyone who submitted links. All right, next up, we'll take a look at this week's Wandering Prompt winner.
Greetings, one and all, and welcome to this week's Wandering Prompt Award Ceremony. Each week in the podcast, Bradley hides a secret prompt in the audio. The first person to post a link with their entry wins a spot in the following episode.
That's right. This week, our winner is Richard Pack with a piece called The Birth of Desideriat. This is, of course, a creation myth as per last week's Wandering Prompt.
Ha! As if writers needed another excuse to think they're gods. Hey now, they create worlds. What else would they be? I don't know. Maybe humble?
All right, you two, that's enough. Let's get into Richard's entry here, The Birth of the Desideriat. So, first off, what I love about this piece is how Richard incorporates several layers into this post. Not only do we get the creation myth from his Tales of the Guildless universe, but the story here strikes out different lines and includes notes inserted by Imara, one of the characters from his Bloodsmith novel. And once more, Richard here reminds me why he's one of the best world builders that I've ever read. The complexity and nuance on display here is so beautiful to see. It's a combination that means we're not only getting some amazing lore, but we can see in real time how the tale has shifted and changed over the course of generations alongside perceptions and other truths that have risen to the surface. It's simultaneously a folklore-type story that's been passed down and a commentary on how the original story is rarely the full one. It's great stuff, and I highly recommend reading it, but in the meantime, let's check out an extended excerpt from The Birth of the Desideriat. In the beginning, the world was naught but swirling chaos. I'd argue that's still primarily the case. Demons and angels, the simplest and most pernicious lie. Angels are just demons by another name, an excuse for the church to act high and mighty. Fought in endless wars for supremacy and control, consuming each other and growing before being felled, separated into lesser beings only to rejoin the fight. Difficult to prove or disprove this, as humans obviously cannot pass through the curtain. Still, every single demon I've spoken to agrees they have no sense of self until they are summoned. I believe it more likely they are snippets of power rather than extant beings. Naught could survive for long, and humans and animals as we know them were entirely absent. Recent research indicates this cannot possibly be the case, but I'm no scientist, and those who support this theory are summarily silenced, so it's difficult to be certain. Amazing work from Richard this week. Keep your ears out for a new wandering prompt hidden somewhere in this episode. Next up, we'll take a look at this week's Power Up Prompt Stories. All right, and this week's power-up prompt was steampunk. We've got a nice chunk of stories to cover here, so let's quickly recap the 3 elements I gave you for this week's prompt. Your setting was the atelier, your character was the clockmaker, and your conflict was the price of progress. Let's dive in and see what we've got for this week's stories. First up in our power-up prompt stories is Till Death Do We Part by Gracie Autumn. Regular listeners of the show will recall that Gracie also wrote a story for last week's prompt, and that one was amazing, but I can hardly believe it, this one is even better. With this one, Gracie immediately establishes this rich sense of atmosphere in place with the atelier and our protagonist, Mortimer. The blueprint and subsequent machine from the prompt is represented here as this strange and endlessly intriguing design that promises something impossible. And it's all connected to Mortimer's late wife and a locket that she left behind. Gracie sets the stage here, offering up some truly heartbreaking moments as Mortimer reflects on how much he misses his wife. All of this is done really well, but the true impact of the story is in the final moments. I don't want to spoil it, but Gracie once again shows us here that endings are in fact her strong suit. The final lines of this story left my jaw entirely on the floor. Another insanely good entry from this author, and I highly recommend you check it out at the link in the show notes. Next up this week is The Curious and Extraordinary Case of the Reclusive Clockmaker by J.M. Gooding. And I'm excited about this one because J.M. messaged me earlier this week saying that I would either love it or hate it. And I've never hated anything he's done, to be clear, but that pitch had me very intrigued. And for context, J.M. also told me he's not a fan of steampunk. Totally fair. What I love and appreciate about this entry, though, is that he puts his own spin on the genre. It's very clearly a J.M. Gooding story, and I mean that as a compliment, of course. It has that classic emotional hook and a beautiful narrative through line that carries us to the bittersweet ending. But what really stood out here for me is the moment between him and Kira right after the story's ending. You know I love it when writers break the fourth wall, and for additional context here, Kira is JM's muse, and she often has strong opinions on his work. This sort of bonus scene at the end is her and JM discussing the story after she just finished reading it, and as you might expect, their conversation ends up being this commentary on not only the story itself and its themes, but the steampunk genre as a whole. J.M. Gooding's characters are some of the most vulnerable and human creations that I've ever read, but his true genius manifests when he allows himself to capture a glimpse of the writer behind the art. It's always quick. You'll blink if you miss it, but I genuinely love these opportunities to get like I said, a quick glimpse of the human being behind the stories. It makes everything land better, and of course, JM's sarcastic humor makes me smile every time. And before I move on, I also have to shout out the joke in the story here about the Victorian-era woman showing a peek of her ankle on accident. I know that's a running joke in the genre, but the way JM snuck it in here was so funny. And with that, we've got ourselves a heartfelt, emotionally resonant, and beautifully introspective entry from one of my favorite writers this week. Please take the time to check it out. Find a link in the show notes. Next up for this week's Power Up Prompt entries is The Compass and the Clock with Terms and Conditions by Genesis McClure, aka Every Root, Every Thorn. Here, we get the next entry in the Perfume of the World Tree series, and it begins in the Scorched Wasteland from one of the prior power-up prompts. And if you're not caught up, there's this paragraph early on that summarizes everything beautifully. It reads, quote, "When that lady with the bird on her collar told me all those years ago not to get involved with Srey Pav, I had no idea she was talking about resurrecting dead gods, serving and fighting world trees, and nearly killing myself on a regular basis to not miss birthdays and anniversaries." That little sample right there gives you a good idea what to expect with this series and with this author's work as a whole. It's surreal, it's wild, it's incredibly paced, it's hilarious, and beneath it all, it's heartfelt as well. The scale and scope of the world is something that really inspires me to push the boundaries of my own multiverse as well. So it's really good stuff. Definitely check it out. And with this author's work, it's become a tradition in the past few weeks that I highlight one of my favorite references from their stories. This week, there's a line that reads, "Finally, I lay down and cry like it's Christmas again, and my mom didn't buy me the Hungry Hippos game like I asked her to." And trust me, the next line is even more depressing. The author also confirmed with me that this is in fact a Donnie Darko reference, which is great. But yeah, this line resonates with me too because I remember agonizing when I was a kid over whether or not my parents would get me what I asked for Christmas. Like it was the most important thing in the world. It's crazy how your priorities shift as you get older. In any case, check this one out. It's another great entry from this author. Link in the show notes. Our next power-up prompt story this week is Turn Back Time by Mina Howell, and this one is actually a poem. More specifically, this is an example of how Mina has mastered the concept of the narrative poem. The piece here perfectly walks the line between poetry and prose. It offers up imagery, dialogue, world building, and more without ever breaking the rhyme structure or rhythm. It's an impressive feat, and the story that exists here between the stanzas is powerful as well. It's the way that she uses elements of the prompt here to tell a story of tragedy that's beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. There's a theme of obsession here and the way it drives us to dive deeper into our grief and make choices that we can't take back. The ending, as many of you know, is the part of poetry that always sticks with me the longest. Here, we're left with a tale of caution, a warning, so eerie that I won't be able to get it out of my head for a long time. And you know what? That's okay, because I want this piece to haunt me. It's just that good. Check the links in the show notes to find it, and shout out to Mina for this amazing entry this week. Really great work. Next up in our power-up prompt entries is Keeping Time by Gregory Blair. Gregory's been participating in the power-up prompts for a while now, and his stories are always amazing, but this one easily is one of my favorites yet. Once more, we get his signature world building in the opening paragraphs, and it's always just rich with detail that pulls me right into the world. We get this impression that time in this world is a, quote, untamable, impenetrable phenomenon, but then the next line hits us with a quote that says, but sometimes time could crack. Now, the contrast there between those two lines is so powerful, and it sends a ripple effect through the narrative. And it made me lean even closer to the screen. I was fully locked in. And what followed is a truly heartbreaking tale that ends with one of the best final lines that I've read in a long time. Seriously, folks, by the end, I had chills from head to toe reading this one. It is stunning work. Find a link in the show notes. Next up in our Power Up Prompt stories this week is Marta's Message by Bradley Hurt. Bradley's another author who's been turning in excellent stories each week for the prompts here. With this one, he leans into the emotional turmoil of the prompt, and it leads to a scene that quite literally broke me. Throughout the piece, there's a line that gets repeated. It says, quote, just build it, the rest will make sense in time. This builds up to the point where the protagonist realizes they will need to destroy their last connection to a lost love if they wish to complete the design in the present. In that moment, another line emerges that says, just build it, you haven't lost me. And folks, I am not afraid to admit I cried like a baby at this line. The emotional catharsis in this story cannot be understated. It crushes you, but then it builds you back up before the ending. It's a beautiful, amazing piece of writing. So please, check this one out as well. You'll find a link in the show notes. And our final power-up prompt story this week is Aproximata by Loki Cone. Now, it has been a long time since I've talked about this author's work here, but I am so excited they're back. Loki Cone has this iconic writing style that blows me away every time I read their work. And this piece is a triumphant return. It's a testament to how Loki Cone can do a lot with the word count here, and that their stories often defy a simple description. When you sign up for a Loki Cone story, you're getting an entire world and all the detail and richness that comes with it. In fact, I'm going to break my own rules here and give you a taste with this first paragraph of the story, because I need you to hear this. It reads, "They came for him on the morning the great clock in the square went silent, and by the time the sun climbed above the bell tower, Savvy stood in the hall of hours before the circle of elders, accused of forging a new god out of brass and glass, and of teaching young Atelierians to question the old ones. Prior Halvard read the charges in a voice that trembled, and Savvy listened. He listened the way he would to any mechanism he did not yet understand, patient and uncomplaining, waiting to be shown its workings, waiting to ask questions of it." And that is the opening. I mean, come on. That's an incredible setup. And I don't usually do excerpts, like I said, because there's always so many stories to cover each week here, but I had to break the rule here and let Loki Cohn's writing speak for itself. This is amazing work. And as you can see, it's more than just a slice of a larger proverbial pie. This is the whole damn pie. Even just the first paragraph sets up a world full of immersive details, and the dedication to detail continues all the way through. In short, if you love beautiful, deep, rich worlds that are equally beautiful in the way that they're written, you cannot miss a Loki Cohn story. I'm so serious. This one is fantastic. It's a great starting point, and of course, you'll find a link in the show notes. All right. Moving right along, we'll dive into our weekly writing discussion next, which includes feedback from me on your story pitches. But first, a quick mindful moment. Hey there, this is Chill Bradley, here with this week's mindful moment. I want to try something new this week. I want to share with you all the recording I did for a poem that I wrote called Car Communion. This is a piece about the power of music and the freedom that one feels during a long drive. I'd love to know what you think of it, so if you'll permit me just a smidge of shameless self-promotion, here's my reading of Car Communion. I didn't know the divine until I heard music and song. I only feel free on the road where I belong. My church is metal, 4 doors and 4 wheels. My demons ride passenger, hands steady on 7 seals. My prayers ride the waves, emotions in perfect sync. I scream the words, push my lungs to the brink. I lay the pedal down, all the way to the floor, trying to run from the past, from problems I can't ignore. What if I kept going? Missed that next turn? Would I arrive somewhere better? Or would it all continue to burn? The temptation to run, it whispers in my ear, but I have to go home, to the place where she is near. So I stay for communion, eat of the flesh, drink of the blood. It tastes bitter like broken promises, washed away in the flood. It's the Holy Spirit, packaged neatly in cords, the words comforting, like protection wards. But when the window's down, nothing else compares. I can see the face of God, and I feel like she cares. This is my car communion, my place away from it all, my sanctuary of peace as the world continues to fall. And there it is. What did you think? I'd love if you shared your thoughts in the comments of the episode here, or you can find the full post on my publication over on Substack. In the meantime, I've got one more surprise for you before I wrap up this segment. Wandering Prompt, Episode 78. Write a story, poem, or personal essay about what music means to you. 1,000 words or less. First to post a link in the comments wins. Good luck. Thanks for listening, everyone. Back to the show. All right, and we're back. This week's writing discussion was about pitching your work or a specific story of yours to readers and agents and the like. It was a marketing exercise where I wanted to see how you'll convince readers like me to read your work. And of course, I offered to provide some feedback on your pitches as well if you'd like that. A few folks did indeed ask for my thoughts, so let's dive in and see what everyone had to say. First up, Hillbilly Hemingway, I love that name, says, "You like Southern fiction? What about the TV show Justified? Because if you do, your boy howdy, I got something special for you." That's a great opening. Bone Country. After Deputy U.S. Marshal Steve Bradshaw kills a man in cold blood, he is exiled back to West Virginia, his home state, chock full of snake preachers, drug pushers, and the dying industry of coal mining. Bradshaw realizes home ain't what it used to be, and perhaps it never was, when in the middle of a soul-searching, a labor war threatens the entire county. And then he followed up saying, "Damn it, I pressed enter too soon." For the record, you can always add another message in here. No one's gonna fault you for that. But hey, even though you pressed enter too soon, I just gotta say, really fun pitch here. I like how tight it is. I know it was cut off a little bit, but I like the succinctness of it. I really love the opening with some of the Southern dialect mixed in there. It sets the mood really nicely. And then just, the title there, Bone Country, is really, really good. And yes, I think a great pitch is composed of, you give the reader something to ground them. So that first paragraph does that. Then we get some intrigue with the title. Then after that, you do a great job here of pulling us into the world. You set the stage. You talk about some of the characters we can expect. You sort of bring in that tone a little bit. And then you leave us with that kind of, inciting incident there at the end that propels us into the story. So this is a really great pitch. A fantastic way to start us off here. And yeah, Hillbilly Hemingway, such a great name. You have my attention. Great start. All right. Next up, E.H. Lau says, "Here's my pitch for the Red Riding Hood saga. A young lady in waiting finds herself on the run after having been framed for the murder of her beloved Princess Snow White. Now, taking up the name Red Riding Hood, she seeks revenge on the true killer, the Queen. Then, one quest ends and another begins. After her quest for vengeance concludes in the original trilogy, Lady Red Riding Hood sets out on a new quest to find a cure for the magical poison that curses her beloved. Newly knighted and armed with her rapier and 2 wolves, Red sets out on her further adventures that will take her to many different lands and meet many different people. A series of short stories set in a fantasy world inspired by tales such as Little Red Riding Hood, Snow White, the Snow Queen, the Ballad of Mulan, and more." And then E.H. Lau says, "Would love to know your thoughts on this and how it can be improved. Thank you." Okay, great. So, first off, really interesting concept here. I love it when a story brings forward a unique premise, and I feel like we've got that here. A retelling of classic fairy tales with some familiar themes, and themes kind of twisted in ways that you don't expect. So let's break it down real quick here. I think the beginning is really strong, but after this first paragraph here, we reach the end of the first paragraph. It says, "She seeks revenge on the true killer, the Queen." Okay, nice, interesting. But then the next paragraph, we start off with one quest ends and another begins. So we're kind of jumping forward in time here. And I understand that it's, concluded in the original trilogy and now there's like this new series going on. But that shift feels a little jarring to me. I think if I were to really nitpick this, I would pick one, right? Like I would either continue that first line of thought with the Queen and talk about that initial trilogy. And then maybe at the end of the pitch be like, hey, at the end of the trilogy too, she's going to go on other adventures, right? I think that might flow a bit better because right now what's happening is this time jump here is taking me out of it a little bit. And you have such a strong opening that I would just focus on one versus the other. But again, let's tease out these future stories here, these other parts of the series. Like, I want you to capture that scope. I just think it should show up a bit later. Let's go chronological here, without spoiling things, of course. That's just my 2 cents. Again, if anybody else has any thoughts, EH Lau asked for feedback, so please feel free to share your thoughts as well in the comments of the episode here, or if you want to track down the writing discussion thread, I'll put that link in the show notes as well. But yeah, my friend Edward, I know you've been on the show a few times here, so I'm able to call you by your first name. Yeah, this is great. And as you know, I'm a fan of this. So that's just my 2 cents on how to make the pitch a little bit tighter. But otherwise, very intriguing and lots of great elements here. One thing that I'll call out too before I move on is I love how, again, when we think of Red Riding Hood, we think of the big bad wolf. And so in this story here, there's this detail where it mentions that she sets out with her 2 wolves. And I love that. It kind of flips the script a little bit. She's in control of the wolves, not the other way around. Really cool stuff. All right, next up, Sarah Tinney says, I have 2 releases planned for August. The first is my first ever flash fiction collection. It's called Everyday Magic and compiles a list of stories I wrote over the course of a month, 1 story a day. Each story is exactly 100 words, but the topics vary wildly. But most of it will show, hopefully, little moments of magic found in everyday life. It also has a bonus section at the end where you can learn how I approached each of the writing prompts for the month. My second release is Jack's Animal Day, an Australian wildlife adventure, and the 3rd book in my Jack series inspired by my son. Jack and his best friend Quoll are off to meet their new neighbor. The problem, they don't know who it is. Join them as they follow a series of clues that lead them into a wide range of Aussie animals. Can you figure out who their new friend is? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. This is great. 2 really good pitches here. I will say I think the second one is a bit stronger, but I love both. So let's break it down real quick. The first one, I love the concept of a flash fiction collection here, especially with the microfiction. And I love how there's little details here about moments of magic found in everyday life, and a section at the end where we learn how the author approached each of the writing prompts. Big fan of the behind-the-scenes element there. So yeah, great first pitch. Now the second one, I did hear about this during Sarah's interview with Hallie Jules, and if you haven't checked that out, definitely head over to Hallie's publication and track that down. It was a great live interview. You can see the recording over there. But in that interview, Sarah mentioned this second book here, the children's book based on her son. That is amazing. That concept right there is like just a beautiful emotional hook where as a reader, I'm like, oh, that is beautiful. I love that. I'm immediately invested, right? So I love the emotional connection there. And then just the fun kind of playful pitch here about them not knowing who the neighbor is and then leaving us on a question. Can you figure out who their new friend is? I really love the structure and flow of that second pitch. Great stuff. Next up, Charlotte Henley Babb says, escape into fractured fairy tales. A middle-aged fairy godmother is turned into a cat who must grant 3 wishes to return to her human form. But she can't talk, does not have her wand or gossamer, and nobody's making a wish. All her potential clients have been burned by magic, the son of Jack from the Beanstalk, the son of Mama Bear, and the handless miller's daughter. Escape today and laugh. Okay, good stuff from Charlotte here. I like this, again, I like when people take a common sort of theme with like fairy tales and twist it into something new and interesting. And that's exactly what we got here. And one thing that Charlotte does really well with this pitch that I liked is that there's stakes right off the bat. So the character's been turned into a cat, which means they want to get back to their human form. We know how to do it, but then Charlotte lets us see the struggles and the conflicts that they're going to have to face in order to reach their goal. And that right there, my friends, creates tension and conflict, and it immediately makes us want to know more. It's a great way to pull readers in. So yeah, fantastic from top to bottom. Also, wonderful slogan there at the end, escape today and laugh. Wonderful. Great work. Next up, Mariah D. Kennedy says, here's mine. Brennan Good has spent her entire life hiding a dangerous gift. She can feel other people's emotions. When Irish detective James Fletcher arrives seeking answers about his late wife's final phone call to Brennan's bookstore, he finds a town reeling from a young woman's murder and suspicion falling on Brennan's brilliant ex-husband. As Hurricane Fiona bears down on the Carolina coast, Brennan's gift draws them further into a mystery where grief, love, and murder collide. To find the truth, both must decide whether they're finally ready to let go of the past. Garden of Little Peace blends character-driven suspense, romance, and a touch of the paranormal in a warm southern setting, excuse me. And Mariah says that she'd be thrilled for any feedback to improve. Okay, let's break it down. So, first of all, I love the structure here. This has a classic structure of a pitch where we get a nice setup with some intrigue there around the character's sort of inherent ability. Really good. I like that. It's a good hook. And then, setting the stage, adding in some of those stakes and some of the conflict. I love how we have some themes here of grief, love, and murder. Again, these are all things that build a picture in the mind of the reader in the best way possible. So it's got a great flow all the way through those first 2 paragraphs. Now, one thing that I'll say is that the ending here, Garden of Little Peace, blends character-driven suspense, romance, and a touch of the paranormal in a warm southern setting. That's a nice description, but it doesn't feel like the strongest ending. So my advice here would be to move that up a little bit. I'm trying to decide exactly where it should go. I almost think that could potentially just be the beginning. So we open by saying Garden of Little Peace is XYZ, and then we dive deeper into the full pitch with Brennan here, and then right through the existing draft. I think if you adjust the order there, you might get a bit of a stronger impact by letting that final line there, to find the truth, both must decide whether they're finally ready to let go of the past. I think that's a stronger ending. So if you flip the script there, you might have a much stronger pitch. That's just my opinion, but overall, it's fantastic. Next up, Wendy Russell says, "This is so kind of you, Bradley. Sometimes it takes an expert pair of eyes to help out when it comes to selling one's work. Really looking forward to seeing what everyone says here and how you engage with them." Well, thank you, Wendy. I wanted to read your response there. I always appreciate your support. And I hope you're enjoying my analysis so far here. I'm trying to give everybody some really good advice. But hey, I appreciate you. Thank you. All right, Asteria Geisterbloom next up says, "You always have the most supportive little events running. Absolutely awesome. Can't wait to listen to it. Pretty sure I'll end up finding one or two new things to add to my TBR." And again, thank you, Asteria. Your support always has been something that I appreciate very, very much. For folks who are unaware, Asteria has multiple times restacked episodes of my podcast and reminded people that she's always listening to it every weekend, and it's become kind of her morning coffee ritual. I think on Sundays is what she said. And that, there's no greater confidence boost than that, right? Knowing that a writer that you respect and a friend of yours is looking forward to your show every week. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? So again, Wendy, Asteria, thank you so much for the kind words here. I really, really appreciate you both. Next up, Lori McIntosh says, "So Bradley, you may have noticed Beth Brower is the writer who has dominated the #1 spot in the Substack fiction leaderboard for forever. So here's an angle I'm toying with. Beth Brower's fans would connect with the community-centric Three Sheep Rebellion with its witty ensemble cast featuring 7-year-old savant Daisy. The small Scottish farming town unites to creatively address an upcoming food crisis while simultaneously starting a rebellion against a 76-year-old Westminster institution, all spurred on by Daisy, of course." And Lori says, "Feedback welcomed." So yeah, let's dive in here. I like this angle. So yeah, Beth Brower, top of this #1 spot fiction leaderboard here on Substack. Being able to find really good and compelling comps, as they call them, or comparisons to other works, is something that I've discovered in recent years. So let me explain real quick for some context for those who are unaware. A lot of stories out there, especially traditionally published ones, will pitch themselves as it's this plus this, right? And they're usually referencing something big and noticeable. So like, for example, my cosmic horror novel, I always say, is Lovecraft Country meets The Thing, right? And that's honestly not the best comparison, but it's a good example of like tying it to something bigger. And the reason why we do that is because it allows people to see something that they recognize, and that familiarity ties them immediately to your work. So comparing your stuff to other people's work, especially bigger authors, is not a bad thing. It's, growing up, I thought it was. I was always like, oh, I don't want to be like so-and-so, but be like so-and-so to an extent, right? Like you want people to be able to create an emotional connection with your work as quickly as possible. So if you say, hey, it's like this, and it's something that person knows, they're going to go, oh, well, I liked that, so I'll probably like this. And that's the connection there. And so the reason why I bring that up is because Lori's concept here of creating something that she references as something that fans of Beth Brower would like is that kind of comparison, right? So if she, for example, were to do this and tag Beth Brower and be like, hey, I think fans of Beth Brower would like this, and here's why. That's compelling, because what's going to happen is Beth Brower might, I'm not saying it will happen no matter what, but she might, restack it. And that's huge, right? Tons of visibility there right off the bat. But even if she doesn't, fans of her will see her name and they'll go, oh, Okay, well, I like Beth's stuff. Let me look at this, right? So it's smart. It's really smart. I like that concept. I like that approach. As far as the pitch itself here, again, interesting concept. I like the mention of the ensemble cast. I like, the stakes here with the upcoming food crisis. It's good stuff. I think what I would recommend, Lori, is take a look at some of the other pitches that we've looked at here that are more kind of traditionally structured. I think any of them will work here. But as you can tell with a lot of the other ones, there's a pattern where we have kind of a hook at the beginning, which in your case, I think the Beth Brower angle is great. And then after that hook, let's dive into, sort of who is the main character, what are they facing, and what are the stakes, right? Like kind of follow that order, and then end on kind of, some sort of, here's what's coming next kind of, cliffhanger, if you will. And I think you have the pieces of all that here. I would just rearrange it a little bit and maybe just, try to create that sense of intrigue just a little bit more, however you can. But again, I totally agree with your approach here about, connecting it to a larger recognizable author and their work. Great stuff. All right, next up, Mina Howell says, I would absolutely love feedback for this one. We're Still Here is a dystopian thriller that follows multiple POVs as they navigate the impending rapture. As the flaws hidden deep within the structures of their society start to show themselves, two women must remember and survive long enough to remember who they are and take back the power that was theirs all along. Okay, good stuff. First of all, love the title. Really interesting title. I like the concept of the impending rapture. That is a nice hook. I'm like, whoa, okay, what? And then the way that you incorporate the stakes here, the flaws hidden deep within the structure of their society, two women who must survive long enough to remember who they are and take back the power that was theirs all along. That's good stuff. I think this just needs a little bit more on the end here, because we're talking about, the main characters here with the multiple POVs. We've got the examples of the two women and what they are trying to achieve. Now, what I would love for you to do is to talk about next, what are they facing that is stopping them from achieving this goal? Obviously, you have, you mentioned the structure of their society, the rapture, stuff like that, but I'd love just a little bit more detail. And if there are more POVs beyond these two, I would love to have them represented as well. So just a little bit more detail, some more specific examples, and then leave us with like a really nice, just kind of, mic drop, final line. I think that would really fill out the rest of this pitch nicely. But what you have here, Mina, is an excellent foundation. But that's, just off the top of my head, I think those are some of the things that could really take it over the top. But it's a very strong hook. So great stuff. Next up, J.M. Gooding says, I write stories about people. Sometimes they're surviving the apocalypse. Sometimes they're arguing with a muse. Sometimes they're remembering someone they've lost. The settings change, but what interests me doesn't. I'm currently serializing Stillwater, a novel that follows a small group of neighbors fleeing Florida aboard a 50-foot sailing yacht after civilization collapses. They're sailing toward a rumor of safety in the Bahamas, but the farther they travel, the more they discover that survival isn't the same thing as living. Yes, there are zombies. My legal team says I'm contractually obligated to mention them, but no, they're not really the point. Stillwater is what I'm writing now. Beyond that, I tend to follow the story more than the genre. I've written cozy metafiction, historical folklore, science fiction, and a body horror comedy universe that probably shouldn't exist. If you come for the infected or the grief or the horror, I hope you'll stay for the people. Okay. Yeah, this is a great pitch of J.M. Gooding's work as a whole, and it's no secret that I'm a huge fan of his work. I mean, he hits all the right notes here. I love how he focuses on the people, because really that his characters are some of the best I've ever seen. Like, point blank. Also, Stillwater, the pitch here, this little mini pitch for Stillwater is wonderful, and it really makes me want to read it. I love the description of the setting, the challenge, the journey, the joke there about the legal team. It's just a really well-rounded pitch, and again, it has me interested. I feel like, even if I wasn't already a fan of zombie fiction, I would say, there's other things I can latch onto here. Again, it's that journey. I was born in Florida, so obviously that's a connection to me specifically. There's good stuff here, right? I also have to give a nod to J.M. Gooding's comedy body horror universe. It's wild. That's all I'll say. If you're interested in checking it out, look for a story called Sausage Fest on J.M. Gooding's publication, and it's not what it sounds like. Just check it out. It's weird, but it's good. Next up, Anton Anderson says, Queen's Quest is a fantasy adventure where you, dear reader, choose what happens next. The foul queen gave Knight Gentle a life or death task, and only you can navigate him through mortal dangers and toward victory. There will be no reward for his toils, only survival. Meet a witch who can't cast spells, a squeamish executioner, a warmongering fairies, and even Bob during the quest for the ages, Queen's Quest. I mean, that's a beautiful, beautiful pitch. Anton's story here, Queen's Quest, is in fact, as it says here, a branching narrative story. You know, a choose your own adventure, if you will. And yeah, I highly recommend it. I've read the beginning of it. I haven't gone down every branch yet, but it's really cool stuff. And I love kind of the classic fantasy feel of this pitch here. So that's wonderful stuff from Anton. Next up, Mita Severin says, glad that the algorithm brought me here. In a second world under the light of two suns, the dominant culture has imposed a form of oppression by neglect disguised as unity. Only one sun's orbit is worth observing, one view of reality worth knowing, that of the Concord. Istria is a curious cultural outsider whose knowledge of the natural world doesn't fit the Concord systems. She may not be alone in that, but she's found one of the few who seek to change those systems. She's an AU, DHD, and asexually coded, featuring autistic absolutism and animism with a fundamental egalitarian streak. She's not broken, in need of fixing or sustained guidance, or someone to complete her. Technically, this is fantasy and there is romance, but yeah. Really, really cool stuff. So tons of interesting hooks here throughout. That first paragraph is a really fun just setup. It definitely gives me like a vivid picture of the world, and it's a unique setup. Also, the Concord just sounds very menacing. I like it. This idea of a cultural outsider, really, really cool. And I love how the description of the character here has all of these different elements that kind of come together to really, again, paint the picture of the character in my mind. And I have to give a nod to this line here about how the character's not broken in need of fixing or someone to complete her, right? That is really powerful, and I like seeing themes like that because, again, it makes me feel like this is a character that I want to root for. So, fantastic work from Mita here. Thank you so much for jumping into the discussion this week. It's great to see new faces. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you liked it, please let me know in the comments. I'm not someone who pretends like I give, the greatest feedback in the world, like my word is the end all be all, but I do love giving feedback, and I try to give, of course, balanced and useful feedback. So if you enjoyed this and you would like me to incorporate more discussions that allow you to get feedback from me, please let me know in the show's comments. Again, I don't want to force feedback on anybody, but it's fun. It's fun to discuss stuff, and that's why obviously we do this each week. So anyway, thank you all for the pitches. And as Asteria said earlier, I too have a lot to add to my TBR, so I appreciate you all. All right, next up, let's dive into this week's featured guest interview. All right, this week's guest is the lightweight bracket winner of the Halls of Pandemonium Challenge from back in May. As one of 3 winners from that challenge, I also took questions from the community here that I incorporated into our discussion. It's a wonderful conversation with an even more wonderful writer. So let's dive into this week's featured guest interview with M. Brandon Robbins. All right, everybody. This week on the Saved as Draft podcast, I'm very excited to welcome the first of our 3 winners from the Halls of Pandemonium Challenge back in May. Today on the show, I have M. Brandon Robbins, the winner of the lightweight bracket. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off by having you tell us just a bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
Okay. I'm from Goldsboro, North Carolina. It's about an hour southeast of the state capital, Raleigh. I have lived here all my life, was born here, raised here, went to school here, went to a local college, which is now a local university, and started working here. I live with my wife of 14 years and our adorable crested gecko named Brownie. By day, I'm a librarian. That's the job that pays the bills. For now, that is not my end goal. My end goal is writing, but I have made some accomplishments in the library field. I wrote the Games, Gamers, and Gaming column in Library Journal from 2012 to 2017 that discussed integrating games and gaming into library services and programming. And while I was at the Wayne County Public Library, I instituted gaming programs, tournaments, game nights, D&D sessions, and we were one of the first libraries, period, in the state, but also in the country, to integrate games and gaming into our programming. Largely because I read about it in Library Journal, and thought that it was a good idea for our community. So I do have that. I'm fairly well known in the library profession around here. Currently, I'm a school librarian. I worked at high school libraries for 13 years, and I will be starting at the first elementary school that I've ever worked at. My first time ever working with elementary school age children in August. Trading experience for a 5-minute commute from my house. As far as my creative journey, there's been some starts and stops there along the way. I majored in English in college because I wanted to be a writer.
Mm.
And when I graduated from college with a degree in English, I was working part time at the public library. I took on a full time position there. And the idea was that I was going to work there for a year or two, get some publication credits, sell my novel to a publisher, and be able to write full time. But it's not that easy.
Yeah.
It is nowhere near that easy. I got a couple of short stories published, nothing in any paying markets. I queried my novel that I had started writing in college, and flatly rejected by every agency I sent my query to. Didn't even get a manuscript request. So, yeah, I was working more at the library. I'd started doing the gaming programs. At this point, I decided to set my writing aside and focus on a career as a librarian. So I got my master's in library science, and started writing for Library Journal, and continued to work for the public library. As fate would have it, I left the public library in 2012 due to a variety of reasons. And in 2013, I started at a local high school as the librarian there.
Hmm.
And, librarianship continued to be my focus. But in 2016, an absolute madman put his hat in the ring to run for president.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about taking the country back and making it great again. And that reminded me of an idea that I had, started sketching on, but hadn't really fully developed, for a Western where a former Confederate general goes out west to try and establish a new Confederate state, an independent state,
Mm.
where, white supremacy, was the law of the land and everything. So I started writing that, and it was a winter where we had a lot of snow days, which is not all that common here in North Carolina. And I was able to finish writing the first draft in about 2 weeks.
Mm.
So we started dabbling in writing again, and kind of took another look at my Western and revising it and polishing it. And my wife had done professional editing before. So I asked her, would she be willing to look at my work and make it, make it readily publishable? Because that's one thing that I didn't have access to when I was younger, was, without paying for it, was an editor. So I had to edit all of my own stuff. So, I had a couple of short stories published in some smaller markets, nothing that paid, but some online publications, so my writing was out there. And in 2017, some of you listening may remember National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I participated. For those of you who aren't familiar, it was basically a nonprofit that encouraged people to actually exercise their creativity and actually sit down and write. And every November was National Novel Writing Month. And you participated, you signed up, and your goal was to write a 50,000 word manuscript by the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
I participated in it before when I was in college, but for the first time, I actually finished the manuscript and had my wife edit it. Um, I eventually found a publisher taking submissions directly. You didn't have to have an agent called Dragon Soul Press. They agreed to publish it, and it was released in December 2020. And I continued to have some short stories published, a couple of poems. Uh, However, the Mr. Haunt was the title of the novel. Having it accepted for publication was not the life changing experience I thought it was going to be.
Mm.
I didn't get an advance. I made no money up front, not even a couple of $100s. I got no free author's copies of the book. It was only available through Amazon because they were probably using Kindle Direct Publishing to publish their novels, which is fine. It's not dishonest or anything like that. It's just that you could only get the book through Amazon, so I couldn't there was no marketing department to call Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, and try and get them to order copies of the book. But I was going to try and turn it into an opportunity anyway, and I was saving up to order a bunch of authors' copies at a discount. And then I got an email from Dragon Soul Press informing me that because of the damages they suffered during COVID, they had to pull all of their novels from publication.
Oh, wow.
So for 6 months, my novel was in print.
Mm.
They made a whole $1.83 in commissions off of it. And it sold like maybe 20 copies. 10 of those were copies I had ordered when I found out it was going to be coming off the market. And I wanted to make sure I had at least copies to give family and friends who hadn't already bought one.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, I just kind of gave up. I was like, this is it. There's nothing past this.
Mm-hmm.
I told myself they're called dreams because you wake up from them, and I quit writing.
Yeah.
Even fanfic, even writing strictly for fun, which I did very little of. All of my writing was in the intention to enter a marketplace somewhere. But eventually, I had my 40th birthday. I realized that I was not getting any younger. I was not old by any means, but I was not getting any younger. I was only going to get older. And I didn't want to die being a quitter. So I started writing again. And I had more short stories accepted for publication. I decided that, I wanted to see if a publisher would take Mr. Haunt as a reprint.
Mm-hmm.
I found a publisher that did. And, I've continued having short stories accepted for publication. Sometimes I get paid, sometimes I don't. I did get a partial advance for Mr. Haunt, and I also got paid for a short story in an anthology by the same publisher a few months later. So I qualified for membership in the Horror Writers Association, which was a tremendous step in getting legitimacy as an author. So, and a year ago, I started my Substack as another outlet to publish writing and part of a writing community. So that is where I am right now. Still very much so as far as pay goes, an amateur, but otherwise have over 20 years of experience writing and hope that it pays off one day.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. That is quite the journey. I'm really happy that at this point you've, from the sounds of it, you had that kind of restart and now it seems like things are moving in the right direction. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people are going to resonate with your story there because I've interviewed so many people for the podcast here, and one thing I can tell you for certain is that the average creative journey is not linear, right? It's like you said, it stops and starts, and as creatives, we have to get very comfortable with setbacks, with rejections, stuff like that. None of which reflects on you as a writer. It's just part of the journey. One thing I wanted to say too is that as a fellow gamer slash writer, I love what you were saying about your work. Kind of bringing gaming into the fold with the library system and stuff like that. That was really, really cool. I wanted to call that out. Um, my next question here, I was wondering, so what was the inciting incident for you becoming a writer, way back when, right? Like I'm curious, like, so for example, like I had kind of the first idea that I wanted to be a writer all the way back in second grade. I'm always curious to ask other authors, how did that spark begin for you? And how early on did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
Well, I've always been an avid reader,
Hmm.
and I've always loved playing video games, always loved movies, always loved stories.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, I got the idea that I wanted to tell my own story. So I started writing short stories when I was still in elementary school.
Good. Nice.
And I remember writing one story. I had, like so many other children did and do, had a collection of stuffed animals that I called my friends. Now, I
Right.
had actual friends. I wasn't a social recluse, but that's what I called my stuffed animals. They were my friends.
Right.
And I wrote a story where all of my friends were a character, and my favorite Dalmatian named Spot was a detective, and they were trying to solve some kind of mystery.
Okay.
And, I would always, take everything right to my mom, my grandma, the rest of my family, and share it with them.
Yeah.
And everybody, especially my grandma, just talked about how good the story was.
I love it.
That, it was just so imaginative, and they could just see everything happening and hear the characters' voices.
Yeah.
So I was encouraged to write more stories, and I kept at it, and kept at it in high school. I entered college with the intention of becoming a writer. We had a small English department. There were only three English majors in my graduating class. There were about a dozen English education majors, but only three, you know, clove cigarette smoking English majors. Um, but all of my professors were very supportive.
Mm,
Dr. David Rigsby, the head of the English department, told me right before graduation that I was already a writer. I just needed credibility. So that's
mm-hmm.
what I've been trying to do ever since, get work
Yeah.
published, add to my published works page, stay ahead of imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely, definitely. No, that's amazing. I always love to hear about, people who had that support because, and this is something again where I've heard all different versions of, stories like this from other authors, but it really is, extremely important as, creatives when we're growing up to have that support system because I mean, I'm sure you would agree. Like when you're young like that, or even when you're just trying to get into writing, if you don't have people in your corner supporting you, or worse, if you have people that are, giving you useless, just bad feedback on your work, those things can really break someone. And I feel like it takes time, as a creative to build up your confidence. So it's just so important to have that kind of support early on and then always, obviously, but especially early on. So I just love hearing those kind of stories. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, absolutely. So for my next question here, I would love to get your thoughts on how you would describe your specific writing style and then what kind of genres you tend to focus on in your work.
Um, One of the books on writing I read early on was the classic Elements of Style by Strunk and White.
Okay.
And the number one lesson I learned from that book that I try to carry forward in all of my writing is clarity and precision.
Okay.
Um, I want my stories to be easy to follow. I want them to be engaging.
Hmm.
I want them to provoke an emotional response in the reader. So I tend to avoid extended description and narration and focus more on relevant details,
Mm-hmm.
on characters interacting with each other, reacting what's going around them, and the tone of their voice when they're speaking. Um, Adverbs are not popular with editors and publishers, so I try to avoid those.
Yeah.
But strong verbs and verb phrases,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Um, my prose may not be as poetic or evocative as I like it to be, except when I'm writing poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but hopefully that also means that the reader is inside the narrative and not just experiencing it as a spectator, but they get a sense of participation and actually being in the room with the characters.
Right, right. Hmm.
I primarily write in the horror genre. Somewhere along the way, that just kind of became my focus.
Okay. Yeah.
I, I love horror. You know, R.L. Stein Goosebumps in middle school. You know,
Yep. Yep.
definitely core childhood memory.
Hmm.
Um, um, so, you know, love horror movies. So along the way, somewhere that became my focus. But I also write fantasy.
Mm.
That was kind of my first love. You know, Lord of the Rings movies came out. The first one came out when I was my freshman year of college. I read the book the summer between high school and college. Had started reading R.E. Salvatore and Ed Greenwood,
Mm.
and you know, just you know that's what I wanted to write was fantasy, and I still write some fantasy. It's more of urban fantasy and dark fantasy.
Hmm.
Still some elements of horror there, but I have started writing a high fantasy novel that my wife wants me to finish and that I am going to finish for her if nobody else.
Right.
But the problem with writing high fantasy is everything becomes talking at some point. You know,
Right.
at some point, any work of high fantasy, no matter how well it's written and no matter how well it stands on its own, it becomes Tolkien fan fiction.
Right.
Um, um, I also write westerns.
Mm.
I had an early love of westerns as a child. Sunday afternoons, my papa, my grandma's brother, he lived with us. Every Sunday afternoon, there was either a western or a Godzilla movie on.
Mm. Hmm.
So I grew up on. I can't even. I didn't even know what Western or Godzilla movie it was on. It's just it was on and it was on the TV and I watched it.
Mm.
And you know, I just love that imagery of the gunfighter and the lawman and the honorable outlaw. And you know, I love that historical period. It's just modern enough that they have some conveniences like non-perishable food and you know electricity depending on exactly where you're set,
Hmm.
and you know railroad travel, but it's just primitive enough to allow it its own set of challenges,
Mm.
and characters have to be really tough, to have to be really gritty to survive in that environment.
Mm.
So actually the western that I wrote back in 2016, last year. I couldn't. Westerns are a tough market. They're a tough sell, so I don't write too many of them.
Mm. Hmm.
But I did, after failing to find a publisher for it, I did end up self-publishing the novel Dead Before Redemption on Amazon.
Mm.
So that's out there for anyone interested. But yeah, since I write mostly horror, that tends to be where my technique is most polished. I'm not above using a jump scare to get a reaction. I don't hesitate to describe blood and viscera in detail.
Hmm.
I tend to draw the line at sexual violence and violence against animals, but otherwise, nobody is safe.
Yeah.
Uh, my endings tend to be bleak or bittersweet at best, something which absolutely thrills my wife, who edits my work. She says she's my biggest fan, but her reading tastes tend to drift more towards Discworld and Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Mm.
So going from that to reading my stuff, it's tough for her.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
I am not one of those authors who feels guilty at killing my characters. So if someone needs to die, they're dead.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. No, that's fantastic. I think that's a great overview of your work there. Um, so yeah, as part of your answer just now, you mentioned obviously a few different authors, and then some of the like kind of movies and stuff that you've seen. And it sounds like those are obviously sources of inspiration. So my next question is, yeah, where do you typically find inspiration for your work? And I would love to hear specifically, since we've mentioned a few times now that you're a gamer. I would love to know like what role games, if any, play in inspiring your work, and if there's any titles that have kind of stuck with you over the years that have directly influenced your work, like you know, for example, in the modern era, like you're writing. I'd love to hear about that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I get inspiration from everywhere and from everything.
Nice.
Mr. Haunt was inspired by my own experiences living with depression and anxiety, my own aspirations to be a popular and successful writer,
Mm-hmm.
and music videos from the 90s,
Mm.
especially Marilyn Manson's Sweet Dreams video.
Yeah.
When I was writing it to kind of warm up and get into the right headspace, because, I work in the school system, so for 10 months out of the year, I have to work 7.5 hours a day outside the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I always have to transition from being a librarian to being a writer. So I would watch, Slipknot and Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails music videos
Mm.
to kind of get into the headspace of writing the kind of tone that I was going for.
Okay.
The book I'm working on now is a zombie apocalypse road trip novel,
Ooh, nice.
and it's inspired largely by the zombie classics. Max Brooks is the Zombie Survival Guide,
Yep.
which is an older book, but an absolute required reading for zombie fans.
Yes.
George Romero's Living Dead movies, especially Dawn of the Dead,
Mm-hmm.
the best one of the series as far as,
Mm-hmm.
and the Resident Evil video games.
Okay. Yeah.
I was there when the first game was published for the original PlayStation. I haven't played all of them, but I have played them faithfully. I've been playing the most recent one, and I really like the idea of, see, because when it comes to zombie fiction, you either have shamblers or runners.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pay attention to Resident Evil, those zombies are really slow and listless. But then when they notice you, they speed up,
Yep.
and I like that tension there. So
Mm-hmm.
that is one element that found its way into my book.
Mm.
Um, my most popular poem from Halls of Pandemonium, The Downward Spiral,
Mm-hmm.
was inspired by the album The Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails.
Oh, nice.
Got the idea of incorporating the Fibonacci sequence from the song Lateralus by Tool.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you listen to that song, the syllables in each line of the lyrics forms a Fibonacci sequence.
Oh,
And
okay.
I just inverted it, to make the shape of a downward spiral.
Mm.
So I guess you could say that music tends to influence the tone and theme of what I write the most, because I almost always listen to music while I'm writing. I am convinced I do have some neurodivergency. I am convinced I'm hyperactive to a certain degree. So having something that shuts off the rest of the world allows me to really focus on my writing.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's what's happening while I'm writing, I tend to try and pair up music with tone and themes that I want to focus on.
Right, right, right. Wow, that is a phenomenal answer. I love that because I'm also someone who definitely listens to music at all times while I'm writing, and I work from home, so basically music is on 24 hours a day, essentially. But I guess not when I'm sleeping. But yeah, that's a fantastic answer, and I love that you called out the music videos too, because I was also someone who grew up in the 90s, and I used to love the way that music videos would kind of incorporate a narrative around the song. And, as you said, having the right music on while you're writing to influence the tone. I mean, that's a great, great answer. I love that.
Thank you.
So for my next question here, you had mentioned, I think, towards the beginning of the interview that you've been on Substack about a year now. I'd
Yes.
love to know what your experience has been like thus far, and then obviously, you kind of found my corner of the community. I want to say right around when the Halls of Pandemonium challenge started, but I'd love to know how you discovered kind of what I've got going on Substack, and then yeah, just the general impression that you have of the community here.
Well, early on, for about that first full year on Substack, I mostly just wrote and published and hoped that, my work would fall upon the right eyes.
Mm-hmm.
A few months ago, I started being actually more involved in the community aspect of Substack. I've been utilizing the notes feature more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I found your Substack because I had, once I gathered a few followers, I was about to say I had tweeted out. I had sent out a note, give me your prompts, your writing challenges,
Mm.
send them my way.
Mm-hmm.
And your Halls of Pandemonium was one of the responses I got. So it's been a supportive community and it's been an enthusiastic community, but in
Mm.
some ways, I do feel like it's kind of hard to crack.
Yeah.
I've been on Substack for over a year. I have, 120, 121 subscribers and I think just as many followers. But then I see people who've been on Substack for 6 months that have 1,000 subscribers. And I'm
Right.
like, how? Like, how? What deal would what entity did you make to get this kind of audience?
Right.
Um, and they are constantly having their posts restacked and shared and commented on. If there's anything I wish I had a cheat code for Substack, it would be growing my audience.
Yeah.
Getting some paid subscribers would be nice. I'm thankful for because I'm not currently paying for any subscriptions because I don't get a paycheck over the summer and I had to cut some cost.
Hmm.
But I'm thankful for any subscribers. But if I could get 1,000 paid subscribers, I could quit my job and write full time.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a lofty goal, but it would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, I fortunately in my case I've managed to find some early success trying to connect with the community, but I have been someone over the course of my writing career, if you will, that I've tried to kind of get involved with communities on all kinds of platforms, and I always had mixed success levels of success until Substack. So I definitely understand trying to establish a presence, build an audience. Like you said, paid subscribers. I mean, we all need to pay our bills, so it's like I think that's more than fair as a goal there. Out of curiosity, what do you have right now, for paid subscribers? If you want to like just tell the audience here, listeners, what kind of benefits do you have for paid subscribers, or are you planning on introducing more benefits, down the road? Just kind of, share your thoughts there.
Well, first of all, I do have benefits for paid subscribers, and my paid subscriptions are some of the cheapest that I have found on Substack.
Okay.
$5 a month to subscribe, or $50 a year.
Hmm.
So essentially 2 months free if you do an annual subscription.
Hmm.
All paid subscribers get an exclusive personalized poem or drabble being a short story of exactly 100 words.
Okay.
We can work out the details of that over email. If you want to, do a poem for an upcoming anniversary or birthday, or you just want something really neat that you can print out and frame. The only thing I ask is that you don't take credit for it.
Okay.
Like, even
Fair.
if you just put it on your own Substack, credit me because I'm the one that created it.
Hmm.
But, you tell me what you want, and then I will supply that.
Okay.
And then if you are a founding subscriber, which is $75, you get once a year a one-on-one writing session with me.
Mm.
Um, Something, Google Meet, Zoom, Discord, however you want to do it. And we can look at something you've written and I can give you feedback. We can just talk about writing and how to be an effective writer. We can brainstorm. We can, whatever it is that you want to use that hour for, as long as you are a founding member or have paid within the past 12 months for a founding membership, then yeah, we can do an annual writing session.
Okay. All right. No, I like that. I really like the kind of exclusive like writing session slash like workshop slot there. That's really nice. I've seen other writers have success with that as well. So that's really cool. Thank you. All right. Well, next, I want to go ahead and transition into the questions that we got submitted by the community for all the benefit of the listeners here. For a while now, my writing challenges have had a prize for the winners where they get a special version of an interview on the podcast here, where I ask not only my questions, but I take questions from the community. So we're going to jump into that here. And we're kicking off with a question from Mina Howell, and she always asks these wild hypotheticals, which I just think they're hilarious. So her question for you is, if you were a pistachio, would you wear your shell all the time or just on special occasions?
Pistachios, they are delicious and they are rich, but they are also soft and delicate.
Mm,
Um, so I'm going to say I'd wear my shell all the time to,
right.
protect myself from the environment.
That makes sense. That's a good answer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, but that makes sense. Okay, good stuff. Yeah, I think what was it? One of her other questions for another winner on a prior interview was something about like it was something about having like balloon animals for feet or like spaghetti noodles for hands. I mean, she has the wildest hypotheticals. Um anyway, that's a good answer. So another question here that's not really about writing, but again, it's kind of tradition at this point. J.M. Gooding asks, in your opinion, what is the most overrated component of a taco? That's part one. And then part two, he asks, if you eat a taco over the sink at 2 a.m., does it count as survival food? So let's start with the first one there. What do you think is the most overrated component of a taco?
Well, and it's funny because I actually had a couple earlier today, but if we're talking about the taco that most Americans are familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
which is, of course, the Taco Bell taco, of which the soft version is the superior variant, um, then I'm going to say the lettuce. I
Okay.
mean, obviously now the lettuce, right?
Right.
But even before the parasites started spreading,
Yeah.
um, Taco Bell just always gets the wiltiest, soggiest lettuce.
Yeah.
It just takes away from the experience of eating what is actually a decent taco.
Right.
So the meat and the cheese is all you really need for that. I always hold lettuce. I got a taco from them a few weeks back, and I forgot it had been a while since I had Taco Bell, and I forgot they put lettuce on their taco,
Mm.
and I had to force it down only because I didn't have much money and I had paid for it, so I was going to finish it, but it was not a pleasant experience. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wilted lettuce is definitely like I'm someone who if the texture of the food is off, it really throws me for a loop. So yeah, like you said, the wilted kind of soggy lettuce would absolutely ruin it for me.
But I was talking about this question with my wife, and
Uh-huh.
she gave a really good answer that I'm going to have to agree with and expand upon.
Uh-huh.
Because generally, like if you get a taco from a Tex-Mex restaurant or a food truck or something, you don't really need cheese or sour cream on a really good taco.
Mm.
If the meat is flavorful and well seasoned, and you have a nice fresh salsa,
Mm-hmm.
that's all you really need. You don't need to add dairy. That overpowers and covers up everything else.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Especially with a birria taco.
Right.
You just don't need cheese on a birria taco. The meat alone is fall apart enough,
Right.
soft enough. So just a warm corn tortilla, some chorizo or carne asada, cilantro, onion, a nice salsa. Cheese on a burger, absolutely. It infuriates me that I have to add cheese to a Whopper. It should come with cheese.
Yep.
The cheese on a taco is not necessary. As
Okay. Yeah.
tacos being survival food,
Yeah.
food you eat with your hands is survival food.
Oh, okay. That's an
Hot
interesting
dogs,
stipulation. Yeah.
burgers, wings, pizza, it's all survival food.
Okay. Yeah.
I would also add anything that you would eat after drinking at 2 a.m. is also survival food.
Yes, 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 yes. I love that. Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, the stipulation of eating it with your hands makes a lot of sense. That's a great answer. Yeah, okay, fantastic. Yeah, JM Gooding submits that question for all of the winners. So I'm very interested to see his reaction. But I think your answers make a lot of sense there. Um, Now, he did follow up with a serious question, which he asks, what was your favorite prompt from the Halls of Pandemonium challenge and why?
Probably my favorite prompt was the one where you had a dream about a machine and then built it when you woke up and you
Okay.
had to write about the machine and describe it.
Yeah.
Because the poem I ended up writing in response to that prompt was my favorite work of my own from that challenge.
Okay.
Flesh Consumed was the
Flesh
poem.
consumed. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a pretty brutal poem. And it was fun to write and fun to read once I had written it. I can't say that about everything else I write. Um, you know, after you poured over it for hours, the last thing you want to do is reread it. But, I have gone back to that poem and, been really satisfied with how it came out.
Okay. Okay, yeah, no, that I remember that prompt, and I don't know if I've read that poem of yours or not, but I will absolutely check it out. And of course, for the benefit of the listeners too on the show here, I will absolutely have a link to it in the show notes as well, so others can check it out. The title there, "Flesh Consumed," the gamer in me is curious. Is that a reference, or was that a kind of like? Was there any thought there to the Doom level of the same name, "Thy Flesh Consumed"? I'm just wondering if there's a parallel there at all.
Well, Thy Flesh Consumed was actually the original title of the poem, but I thought Flesh Consumed was a little more ominous, a little less biblical, and a
Mm,
little more, ambiguous as to what it could be about.
right.
I did think about, the Doom level,
Yeah.
but there's no direct relationship now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I was just curious. Yeah. I couldn't resist asking. All right. Cool. Yeah, definitely. So we'll have a link to that one in the show notes. Great answer there. Next up, Verdant Butterfly asks, what is your superpower? And she says, everyone has something they're good at, even if it's train spotting. So yeah, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
Well, I'm not sure how this would translate as a superpower as far as super strength, super speed, super wealth. But I think I'm really good at breaking down complex ideas into easily understandable concepts.
Okay. Yeah.
I have done a lot of that as a librarian and as an educator.
Makes sense.
I'm fairly talented at explaining rules to games. Once you have taught hyperactive teenage boys how to play Dungeons and Dragons and Flux, that is the trial by fire there.
Mhm.
I can analyze movies without sounding pretentious. At least I think so. Um, when my senior year in high school, we took a field trip, and it was a long distance trip. So we had a charter bus that had a TV and VCR in it, and we watched The Matrix. And I was the only person on the bus to actually think that movie made any sense. So on the trip back, I was explaining it to all my classmates,
Yeah.
you know, and then they were like, "Oh, okay, I get it." um, uh, I've always had good results with my teaching. One of my favorite things to do as a school librarian is to teach students how to use a database
Mm,
because I got like no instruction in that in college. I was just
right.
told, "Here's the website, figure it out." But it's actually something that's really easy once you know what you're doing. So students come to it intimidated and they just want to Google everything. But um, I really try to break it down and approach it on their level. As
Mhm.
someone who's totally new to this form of research.
Yeah.
So I think that's what my special talent is being able to take big ideas and turn them into several easily digestible small ideas.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, no, I love that answer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is absolutely, a skill that takes a lot of practice, and I would say it's pretty rare. Especially with being able to break down extremely like complex stuff. So I love that answer. My next question here, kind of transitioning back into the questions I had for you, I wanted to talk a bit about what you have planned here for the rest of 2026. You had mentioned a couple of things, like, for example, the road trip zombie novel that you're working on. Obviously, you mentioned Mr. Haunt. Sounds like it's getting a revival as well with the new publisher. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to take us through kind of some of your big projects here in 2026, and feel free to also give us kind of a little overview of each one too, if you'd like.
Okay. Well, Mr. Han is actually coming out in 2028
Okay.
with Slay House. When the editor emailed me with the final offer, basically he was like, "Our calendar is full, but we really want to publish this book, so it won't be until 2028.
Got it. Okay.
If you want to find a publisher who can put it out faster."
Mm-hmm.
But my thinking is I can say thank you, but no thank you, and try and find and spend the next 3 years trying to find another publisher, or I can sign the contract now and know that in 3 years, because this was last year when the exchange happened,
Okay.
and know that in 3 years this book is going to come out. So
Mm,
that's the decision I made.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's looming on the horizon, and hopefully we'll be more of the life-changing that I thought having your first novel published would be. Um, I have tried to write another novel ever since. I always end up either sharing parts of it or talking about it with somebody. And I have developed a superstition of talking about works in progress. Because
Okay.
I find that if I talk about them with people, oh, this story is about this character, this happens, this is the theme, never finish.
Mm.
It stays on my hard drive 25% complete.
Okay.
Whereas if I keep it to myself, tell people I'm working on this, I'll talk about it more once I get the first draft done,
Mm.
then I see that first draft through to the end. And then, I can talk about it because I'm just revising it and editing it from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I just finished in the last month the first draft of the zombie apocalypse road trip novel. And my wife is editing it now. And I am terrified of writing query letters. They are such. I'm convinced that nobody has ever written a good query letter.
Yeah.
They've gone to the right agent. Um, so, but I mean, I want to make writing my full-time job, and a contract with a larger publisher is definitely how to go about that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get that contract without an agent. So I'm going to try and find an agent for this one
Okay.
instead of submitting it directly to a smaller publisher.
Right. 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 Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and then, of course, just I have several short stories out on submission right now on a couple of poems
Mm-hmm.
that are, hopefully they'll get picked up. I'll continue to update my Substack. The stuff that ends up on my Substack tends to be responses to prompts I have found on Substack,
Mm-hmm.
or part of writing challenges I've found on Substack, or other works that I just can't seem to find the right market for. Either they've been rejected 2 or 3 times and I can't really see how to improve them. Um, it's not like I put subpar work on it. It's still, I put everything into everything that I write.
Yeah.
But my primary goal is to turn it into a publication credit that can help me write full time.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I want it to find an audience. So if that's not the case, then I'll put it on Substack.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely understand the superstition around not wanting to talk about stuff in progress too much. I wonder, as soon as you said that, I was thinking about, I've been stuck on my current work in progress for many years now, and I'm like, I wonder if there, if I also suffer from something similar where I need to be a little more closed off to get these things done. It's a good point that you made, I think. Um, but no, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, really excited to learn more about the zombie road trip one, and then obviously having a book locked in for 2028 is fantastic. Does the zombie road trip novel have a working title at all? By the way, I was curious.
Yes, The Road of Tainted Blood.
Ooh, okay, I like that. Okay, good stuff. All right, awesome. Well, I've got one more question for you, my friend. Here, this is something I ask all the guests that come onto the show. So, given all of your experience thus far, your creative journey thus far, if you were to sit down with a writer who's just starting out on their creative journey, or maybe they're picking back up again after some time away from writing, what is one piece of advice that you would give someone like that?
Just sit down and write.
Hmm.
Just put pen to page or finger to keyboard or however you write, and just write. Don't worry about making it good. You can edit something that exists, but you can't edit a blank page.
Right.
So just write. It's probably going to suck, but the best way to learn is to learn by doing. When I was younger and hung out on the Absolute Right forums, I ran across this idea of a million words of crap, which basically says that you have to write a million words before what you start to write is any good.
Okay.
Now, that's not literal, maybe it only takes you a couple of 100,000. Maybe you're just a prodigy and you're a good writer to begin with. But, the idea that your early stuff is going to be where you're learning, where you're, developing your ability to write and you're making your writing better and finding your own voice, all of that is impossible to do without writing.
Yeah.
So many people are like, well, I've always wanted to be a writer. Writing is the easiest artistic pursuit you could take up because everyone learns how to do it at an early age.
Yeah.
Not everyone learns how to be a painter. Not everyone learns how to be a sculptor. But, the tools to be a writer are given to everybody in grade school. So everybody who wants to write has the capability to write. Once you've written something, seek out a community to share it in. Don't give it to your friends and family that are going to think it's awesome and not, teach you anything from the experience. Set your feelings aside, listen to criticism. That's how you get better. But all of that is impossible without having written first.
Yeah.
Just sit down and write.
Yeah.
Just write. Don't worry about what to write. Just write what comes to your head. Want to try to do an outline first, do an outline. But I generally don't outline what I write. I generally just go with it. And, I may make notes as I'm writing on longer work. But, just that's where you need to start. It's just by actually putting the words on the page.
Right. Wow. Yes. That is an excellent answer. Very good advice. That takes us to the end of my questions here, but wanted to congratulate you again on the lightweight bracket win from Halls of Pandemonium. I hope to see you in a future writing challenge. I do several of them throughout each year. So, this has been a very insightful interview. It's been wonderful getting to know more about you and your work. And again, thank you for that phenomenal answer there with that last question. That is amazing advice.
Thank you.
All right, and a big thank you to M. Brandon Robbins, again, for not only participating in the challenge, but for also taking the time to come onto the show here. I look forward to seeing more of his work in future challenges. All right, let's wrap up this extended episode with a look at next week on Substack. All right, my friends, if you're still here, thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the episode. It really means the world to me. Next week on Substack is going to be a pretty standard week, but there are a few surprises I've got in store for you all. I will say I have family visiting at the end of July here, so I'm working out my exact schedule, but things might get a little quiet, a little more constrained here for a few weeks, so please bear with me. Tomorrow, though, I've got a brand new power-up prompt for you all, penned by the great J.M. Gooding himself. It's going to be open genre, but you're going to have to wait and see what he prepared for us, because I want to leave it a surprise. I promise you'll enjoy it, though, and I can't wait to see what you do with it. Also, this coming week, I'll be posting my full review of Tom Schechter's book, The Shieldbreaker, Book 1, The Last of the Atella. That'll be out this Wednesday, so please look forward to that. But I'll tell you right now, I love this book. It's really good. And before the end of the week, I'll have a big announcement that you'll want to check out. If you recall, Lord Devereaux did show up at the beginning of the episode, and that, my friends, was not an accident. His presence usually precedes a writing challenge, after all. Wink, wink. And beyond these things, I'm hoping to finally finish the next chapter of the Order of the Pawn, the Devine series that I have had on hold for a little while now. Really hoping I can start that again, and I thank all of the Devine fans out there for your patience. As soon as the chapter's done being written, I'll just need to find time to record the narration and to get voice acting from the rest of the cast. So that means that this week, I should have a release date that I'll be able to announce for all the Devine fans. All right, that's all I've got, though, for this week. So, again, thank you so much for being here. And if you haven't yet, please check out the first episode of my new podcast, Dream Drafts. It's a meditation and mindfulness podcast for writers, hosted by Chill Bradley. Paid subscribers even get early access to new episodes. So you can check out episode 1 right now, and if you're interested, upgrade to a paid subscription to get immediate access to episode 2 and 3 this coming Monday. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go shift into weekend mode here and become a gamer who needs to clean the house for his family visiting in a few weeks. The work never ends. But I am wishing you all a safe and productive week as always. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.
Bradley, Are you available to discuss our dragon problem?
Oh, hey, Lord Devereaux, yeah, sorry, I was just working on the podcast. Okay, so what kind of dragon are we talking about?
Well, how do I put this? Viscount, can you help me?
Of course, cousin. It's an absolute circus down there, Bradley. The dragon is gathering a horde of stories and art. Wait, really? Okay, now you've got me really intrigued. All right, you two, lead the way.